My name is MK Williams and I'm a published author. Today I'm going to be bringing you the second video in my series on how to land a podcast, and today's topic will be how to maximize the impact of your podcast appearance. So there's several things you need to do before the podcast and several things that you need to do after. So I will go over those in chronological order. So before the podcast airs, the host should be able to give you some kind of an idea of when your appearance will go live. So sometimes it'll be a live podcast. It's airing right now as you're talking. Sometimes it'll be 2 weeks out. One of the podcasts I was on was 3 months out. So you want to be aware of this timeline because as you're talking about your story, your journey as an author, your business tips, whatever it might be, you might make a reference to your upcoming book that's going to be out on X date. So you want to be aware of when the book is going to go out compared to when the live date will be for the podcast. So for example, you may have a case where I did where it was 3 months in advance. So instead of saying, this isn't out yet, blah, 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 here's my book, this isn't out yet, I said, it will be out by the time this airs, to make it clear to somebody that while I'm talking about it in a tense that shows it's not live yet, by the time they're listening to it, they sure can go and purchase the audiobook, ebook, print book that I'm talking about. So you want to just be aware of that. You certainly don't want to say that too much and be too salesy on the podcast, but where it makes sense, you want to try and fit that in as it's necessary. After the podcast has aired or is recorded, you want to make sure that you are checking all of your links everywhere that you exist online. All of your social media profiles, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Goodreads, everywhere, as well as your author website. You want to check every link to make sure it's working. Are there any errant typos? Does everything make sense? So when I landed a major podcast, I made sure to go through and I revamped my entire website. I checked all the metadata. I added a press kit page. So one of the key things to remember when you're on a podcast is that the audience you're talking to is the audience of the podcast, but also other podcasters or other people who do author interviews who may be listening to kind of see if you would be a good fit for their audience. So those people might go to my website and say, okay, was this the only podcast they were on? Have they done others? So I created a press kit page that gives detailed information on who I am as an author, a bit about my books, biographies in different sizes, and it pretty much is a signal to anybody who is looking to book people for podcasts or interviews that I'm legit. I know what I'm doing. I've done this before. Yes, by all means, please contact me to be able to book me for the next podcast or interview. So it's something you may want to consider. I also made sure to tease my audience. So after I recorded it, I took some cute Instagram photos with the microphone that I borrowed and headphones and everything like that to say something big is around the corner, just to get people excited. And my audience, that when I post a link, they'd be ready to listen. They would be all for it. So this is your chance to really appeal to a new audience. So you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward when they are listening and they're engaging with you. They say, okay, I need to go check out this author on whatever channel is their preference. If you could think of whatever you did when your first book launched, what could you do all over again if you had the chance? Do that now. Do that before the podcast goes live. So that way, this is a whole new group of people who haven't seen you before. They haven't seen those previous mistakes. You can put your best foot forward with this audience. You also want to make sure that if it's a live recording, that you're aware of that. So everything that I just mentioned, you would have to do your website, your social profiles, do that beforehand. So it does take a lot of planning. It'll be very rare that you'll be like, okay, I'm on this podcast, and then an hour later, you're sitting down and having the conversation. You usually have some time between when it's booked and when it's recorded. You usually have time between when it's recorded and when it airs, but again, if the recording is live, that's something to keep in mind. So the key to maximizing your podcast appearance is planning, scrutinizing your own profiles to make sure that if you are a first-time person viewing, would you think I'm a legit author? Would you purchase the book from me? Would you want to follow me? And just really making sure that you're putting that best foot forward and maybe correcting past mistakes that you've made. So I hope you found this helpful. If you've already landed a podcast and now you want to know how you can maximize on it, if you have, please click like or subscribe below. That would really help me out so that more people could find this information. And now you can get back to writing your book.